everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, back again with another look at this week's Monday Night Raw. But how good was Raw? There's only one way to find out, and that's by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. That's right, it's time for Monday Night Raw Graded. Lots of things in store to talk about on this week's Raw. There was a US title match, there was a Tag Team Turmoil match, and there was also the ongoing King of the Ring tournament. But we start off with it being boss time, as Michael Cole insists upon saying, as Sasha Banks made her way to the ring to start the show. Now, she goes on to cut a promo. I've seen a lot of arguments online today about how good, or specifically a lot of people seem to be saying how bad this promo was from Sasha. People saying like, she's hot garbage on the mic, she sucks, that's why she's never got a real, actual big push before. So I was expecting an absolute car crash here, but let's see how it went. I honestly think there might have been a bit of hysteria going on. Sasha's one of those people who's really polarizing, and then people defend her, and then people, attack her, and it all that. I think everyone kind of loses their sense of trying to watch the show as objectively as they can, and everyone just kind of gets carried away a bit. I don't really understand. So basically, Sasha gets on the mic and admits to everything. She says, you know what? Everyone's been talking about how I threw a fit at WrestleMania. I did. Everyone's been talking about how I was crying on the locker room floor. Yes, I did. Everyone's been talking about how I took my ball and went home. Yes, I did. She says, yes, I was upset, but you don't understand why I was upset. It wasn't because we lost those women's tag team titles, it's because I was relegated to a multi-person tag team match at WrestleMania while Becky Lynch was getting a bigger paycheck in the main event. And she said that those titles meant even less to her than the match itself. It was all a bit controversial, really. I'm not sure why they quite approached it from this angle, the writing team, but at the same time, it was delivered fine. It wasn't she didn't stumble over any of her words particularly. She didn't deliver it particularly well either. It was just a sort of standard promo to kick off Monday Night Raw. It got cut off by Natalya though, who came charging down to the ring to beat up Sasha, and it kind of all got split up by security, neither woman getting the upper hand, and then we'd have a match later on tonight. Yeah, I'm going to give this opening promo a C+. It's still exciting and fresh to see Sasha there, but the promo wasn't a great one. Not specifically because of how Sasha delivered it or anything, I just didn't really enjoy the writing of the promo. I didn't enjoy the message that they were trying to convey here. The bit that I really don't enjoy is the idea that, the rest of the women's division means nothing to her unless she's in the main event of WrestleMania, or the fact that those women's tag team titles mean nothing to her because she wasn't in the main event of WrestleMania. I mean, first of all, don't bury one of your belts, especially the newest title on the show, and especially one that's being defended regularly now by Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. And secondly as well, why have they got Sasha to kind of cheer? They've kind of retconned history, I suppose, a little bit, because Sasha and Bayley really did care about those women's tag team titles. They were, fighting for them in that Elimination Chamber. They were then really proud after they won it and wanted to defend it, not just on Raw and SmackDown, but in NXT. That never quite happened, of course. And then they lost it at WrestleMania. And for them to now claim that Sasha never cared about those tag titles, I think is a little bit insulting to the audience, or maybe they're just trying to portray Sasha as a lying and delusional heel, which is totally fine. That's fair enough if they're doing that. But at the same time, don't bury a set of titles in doing so. So yeah, a slightly questionable start to Monday Night Raw, but we move on to King of the Ring match, one of the more anticipated matches of the first round, Ricochet versus Drew McIntyre. When Drew makes his entrance, he sits in the friggin' throne and holds up the scepter and wears the crown. Drew, man! Why have you done that? Now we know you're not going to win. This is a great TV match. There's some unique spots like Ricochet leaping off the steps straight into a big Glasgow Kiss headbutt from Drew McIntyre. And the finishing sequence is really cool as well, with Ricochet getting hoisted but kind of landing nimbly on the middle ropes and then jumping off and then nailing a sick, not a code breaker, what's it called again? Oh my god, a recoil! A recoil! It's always been called that. Never question it. Ricochet picked up the win shortly after that with the 630 senton and moves on to the next round. This gets a B+ from me. Really good TV match between two really good wrestlers. It makes Ricochet look really strong. I don't think it makes Drew look particularly weak because he's lost to a guy who's just been portrayed as on fire in this match. Ricochet was pulling out the sort of stuff that makes him such a special wrestler. So I don't think it's too bad that Drew's lost yet again. I think in this case, it works out quite all right. Is Ricochet going to win this tournament? The road looks pretty clear for him right now, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if he made the final, maybe facing Andrade from the SmackDown side of things. And if those two meet a Clash of Champions, I honestly don't care who wins. Just give them 30 minutes and let them absolutely tear the house down. Next up, straight into another King of the Ring match, The Miz versus Baron Corbin. The Miz cuts a little promo before the match saying, you know what, I've achieved a lot in my WWE career so far, and he bloody has. He lists them all as well. I was like, Jesus, The Miz has won quite a lot in his time. He says, one thing I've never won is King of the Ring. So he says that tonight against Baron Corbin, this is the first step in becoming king. And the crowd all go, of the ring. And Miz goes, awesome, King Awesome. But it falls really flat because of the pause that they left in between. Ooh, it was a little bit awkward. However, on the plus side, this was a good match between two very solid wrestlers. It wasn't as good as the previous one, Drew versus Ricochet, but it was still really entertaining in its own right, in my opinion. I really enjoyed the spot where Corbin did his whole, like he evades an attack and then slides around the ring post on the outside, gets back in, but The Miz was ready for it and hit him with a skull-crushing finale. And then Corbin kicked out, which was a nice, convincing false finish, and it did simultaneously make everybody go, oh, Corbin's just kicked out of a finisher. Is he on the end of another big push at the minute? Shortly after that, Corbin hit the end of days and picked up the victory and then sat in the throne, which would have been really cool if we hadn't seen Drew do it about sort of 20 minutes earlier. But he sat in the throne, put on the crown and held up the scepter and cut a promo saying he was asked about a WWE.com poll where the universe wanted anybody but Baron Corbin to win the King of the Ring tournament, but he doesn't care. All hail King Corbin. I like that, to be honest. I'm going to give this a B. The match was decent, and also I think this is the perfect use of Baron Corbin. I think that the tide is starting to turn a little bit on him. It's changing from go-away heat that we've seen plague Baron Corbin's recent run into kind of genuine heel heat now, because they're booking him more wisely in this King of the Ring tournament, I feel. I wouldn't be surprised to see him knock off a couple more baby faces maybe en route to the semi-final or the final, because he's healing it up really well. I enjoyed him saying, I don't care what the fans think, all hail King Corbin. And everyone's having a great time booing him as well. I can't wait to see him get knocked out. I think that's going to be hilarious and fun. Unless he doesn't get knocked out and wins the whole thing. But he can't, because he's just worn the cape and held up the scepter. So we know that that's not going to happen, right? Right, guys, right? Right? Yeah? Next up, Bayley versus Nikki Cross. This was a pretty short match, and predictably, Bayley won with the big diving elbow, preserving her momentum, I guess, heading into that title match with Charlotte Flair, which she's almost certainly going to lose. No, I shouldn't say that. Like, if Bayley wins after a hard-fought title defense against Charlotte, that's a massive result. If Charlotte wins, it might seem like another step backwards or just a bit of a deflating end. We'll see how it goes anyway. We'll see how it goes at Clash of Champions. This gets a C+, not much to comment on really here. It was only a few minutes long. I generally sort of disagree with the match being booked. The match itself was totally fine. I just don't think that it should have been Bayley versus Nikki Cross. It should have been Bayley versus someone else to preserve her momentum, not one half of the women's tag team champions. And as it turns out, it wouldn't be the first instance of regular tag teams being made to look weak on this week's Raw, which was a bit of a recurring theme. Now let's see what's next. An 8-team Tag Team Turmoil match to determine the number one contenders for Rollins and Strowman's Tag Team Championship. So for the Tag Team Turmoil match, I am going to have to use my notes because quite a lot went on here. This was pretty long. This was like half an hour plus, I think, when all was said and done. So 8 teams to determine the number one contender for Clash of Champions for the Raw Tag Team Championships. And the first 2 teams out were the Viking Raiders and the B Team. B Team, go, go, go. B Team, the Viking Raiders won very comfortably, fair enough. Next up, the Raiders versus the previous Raw Tag Team Champions before Rollins and Strowman, the OC, Gallows and Anderson. This one ended in like a double DQ or a quadruple DQ or whatever you want to say, which was really deflating, to be honest, and kind of made both teams like a little bit stupid because the ref was telling them all to stop brawling and get back on the apron and nobody listened. And then afterwards they all just stared at each other and went like, Next up, Gran Metalik and Lince Dorado, my boy, representing the Lucha House Party against the team of Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode. Robert Roode. They're a tag team now, don't ask. They're a tag team now, and they're gonna bloody knock everyone's socks off, they are. The pace actually picked up quite a lot during this fall. I enjoyed this fall. It may have been my favourite fall of the match, I'm not quite certain. But basically, Ziggler's in there, the Lucha lads are in there, and Robert Roode, or Bobby Roode or whatever, he's been booked terribly, of course, in the past quite a long time, but you always forget that he's actually a very good wrestler. Remember, like, he used to be an Impact World Champion and everything, NXT Champion, and it's just a shame to see how far he's fallen. The finish to that fall was really cool with, I think it was Gran Metalik going for a handspring, and then on his way back, Dolph Ziggler super kicked him in the back of the head, which was a really unique finish. And the next team out to face them were the Revival, who are surely winning this match, right? The crowd really weren't as into this fall, maybe because it's heel versus heel, or maybe just because by this point the match had been going on for quite some time. It was a decent fall, but it really did suffer from the lack of crowd noise and interaction throughout. And oh god, yeah. And Ziggler and Roode won. Roode hitting the glorious DDT on Scotty Dawson. And, that's an interesting decision, isn't it? Next team out, Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. And I'm thinking, well, Ziggler and Roode must be pretty tired by now. Do the underdogs stand a little bit of a chance? No. Dolph Ziggler super kicked Ryder before very long at all. And they moved on to the final matchup. And the final team out to face them are Heavy Machinery, right? And by this point I was thinking, well, you know what, Heavy Machinery versus Rollins and Strowman, a Clash of Champions. That's not the most natural matchup in the world. It's 4 baby faces going at it. But at the same time, I don't know if I have too much of an issue with it. It would still probably be quite entertaining. And I was watching it thinking that, yeah, that's pretty good. Heavy Machinery set up for the trash compactor. And Ziggler and Roode just turn it all around and hit their finishers and pick up a monumental, unlikely victory out of absolute nowhere on their first night together as a tag team. I mean, it was a good finishing sequence. It was cool how they reversed the trash compactor into the zigzag and one member of Heavy Machinery fell onto the other one. It all looked quite nasty and brutal. But man, I was not expecting that at all. I'm going to have to give this a C+. I mean, it dominated Raw. This was like the longest thing on Raw by quite a wide margin, and it felt it as well. The crowd obviously fell asleep halfway through, which is a bit of a shame, and it didn't really give Ziggler and Roode's unlikely victory that big moment that it probably deserved. At the same time, I have to really disagree with Ziggler and Roode winning. A lot of the performances in this match really impressed me. I didn't have a problem with the wrestling itself. You know, it doesn't get a lower grade than a C+ because of that. But I really didn't like the booking. I mean, I understand you need a heel tag team to go and face Rollins and Strowman at Clash of the Champions, but you've got so many wrestlers on the roster, just use one of your existing tag teams. You might be asking, well, why is that such a bad thing? Why is it so bad that this new tag team have won it? It's not like the biggest cardinal sin in wrestling or anything, and it's not. But I do think that it makes a lot of the other teams in this match, established tag teams in the Raw division, look pretty weak. I mean, the Revival looked pretty weak for failing to beat a more tired team who aren't anywhere near as experienced as the Revival. It also makes Heavy Machinery look pretty weak, and they're the big up-and-coming babyface in the division. The big up-and-coming heel tag team in the division, Viking Raiders, look really stupid, as did the outgoing champions, the OC, because they got double DQ'd. I really think the booking in this match was very counterintuitive indeed. But who knows, maybe it'll pay off. Maybe it'll emerge that Ziggler and Roode have been taking secret tag team classes since like 2005 or whatever, and they're just dripping in experience. And if that happens, then I'll retcon this grade into an A+, easy. Next up, that match that was set up earlier in the opening segment, Sasha Banks versus Natalya. Natalya just charging Sasha at the bell. The referee stopped her, rang the bell, Natalya just charged her again. This match wasn't very long at all. I think it might have been under 5 minutes, but it was short, it was nasty, and it was intense, and it was pretty much everything it needed to be. Sasha Banks winning with the Banks statement, or like the modified Banks statement, the one where she gets her opponent's arm and uses that to choke them and crank back instead. Sasha also attacked Natalya after the bell, clamping on another Banks statement, really driving home the fact that she's a vicious and vindictive heel now. This gets a B. It was really short, but I think it was exactly what it needed to be. Next up, Cedric Alexander versus Cesaro. Cedric obviously is progressing in the King of the Ring tournament. He already won his first round match, and now he faces Baron Corbin next week. So in the middle of the match, we cut backstage, and Corbin was watching on, scouting his next opponent, Cedric, and wondering, how am I going to beat him and move on to the semi-finals where I'm going to lose to Ricochet, who's going to move on to... No, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to calm down in case it all goes wrong and I look like a tit. This was a good match. It made Cedric look strong and brave. He sold the leg a lot. Cesaro was working the leg, and that led to Cedric going for a handspring, but he could only do it off one leg, so it was slower, and that led to him getting caught in an ankle lock, further cranking up the pressure on the leg, which I think may play into like the equation next week when he faces Corbin on Raw. But Cedric does manage to actually escape the ankle lock and hit a lumbar check for the victory over Cesaro. Really strong match between two really strong wrestlers, but it was pretty short, and it didn't quite hit the heights of like Drew versus Ricochet from earlier on. So I'm going to give it a solid B, and I am excited to see what happens next week with Cedric and Corbin, but I do think that if Corbin wins, we all need to just calm down and remember that he's probably going to get his comeuppance, so don't be too angry that Cedric's out of it. I'm just warning you. If Cedric wins, then happy days, you know? Long live Cedric Alexander, but with him having a bit of an injured leg after this match and facing Corbin in the next round, and Corbin's proclaiming himself the next king, I do think that Cedric may be about to lose, and we all just need to not panic if that happens. And finally, the main event of the night, a US title match pitting AJ Styles against Braun Strowman. This was built to earlier on in the night with, for example, Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman being shown backstage, playing nice, but then Strowman officially challenging Rollins for that Universal title at Clash of the Champions, and Rollins accepting as well. Then later on, Strowman was talking up his chances against AJ in this match in the main event, saying, it's going to be a really busy night for me at Clash of Champions because I'm going to win that US title, defend it at Clash of Champions, and have to defend my Raw Raw Tag Team and Universal Championships, or defend the Raw one and win the Universal one. I'm getting confused now too. There's too many titles that Strowman could win. He's like Bobby Lashley in his latter days of his TNA run. Except he's not, because Strowman doesn't win this match. It was a good match. It was really fun to watch, but the ending, which I agree with from a booking perspective, did sort of end Raw on a bit of a deflating note. So I'm really conflicted about this one. I'll just explain what happened. So the story of the match is like Strowman looking strong, chucking AJ all over the place. AJ's doing a dynamite job of bumping all over the place for Strowman. And then eventually AJ works his way back into the match a little bit, but Strowman's just too strong. He just powers out of the calf crusher at one point, which is a really nice spot. Then the referee ends up on the apron, and it's not for no reason. It worked into the earlier story of the match, don't worry about that. AJ kicked Strowman, he knocked the referee off the apron, and the referee was totally down, and AJ just went uber heel mode from this point forwards. So now AJ's raking Strowman's eyes, kicking him right in the peen, hitting him with a steel chair, and Strowman's not very happy about that, to be honest. He hits the running power slam, but the referee's still down on the outside. He can't make the pinfall. Strowman gets the visual pinfall, but doesn't win the US title. The match is still going on. Now the club run out, and Strowman takes them out with a steel chair. Bang, bang. Gallows and Anderson down. They get out of the ring. Strowman's still got the steel chair in his hand. And you know what that means, because the referee recovers, looks in the ring, and AJ Styles plays totally dead. It's the old Eddie Guerrero spot, the pretending you got hit by a chair behind the referee's back. And you know what? It works. The referee calls for the bell, DQ, Braun Strowman loses the match, and AJ Styles retains his US Championship. Strowman ends Raw on a slightly happier note, beating up all three members of the OC and hoisting the US title briefly before just chucking it down at AJ Styles and lifting his hands. And it's all right. I'm not sure what grade to give this one. I'm going to give this a B-, right? Because I know a lot of people were quite annoyed by this, but I wasn't too annoyed. I see why they booked it. You know, they don't want AJ to lose that US Championship yet. And I understand why they thought this was probably the next step in the progression of the storyline. It doesn't mean it was particularly exciting an ending to Raw, but at the same time it was a sensible one. And I enjoyed the busting out of the old Eddie Guerrero spot as well. The match itself was pretty damn good until it all got a bit overbooked towards the end. So I'm giving it a B-. I don't think that reflects too harshly on it, and I didn't think it was actually that bad, but it was a deflating ending to the show. In fact, I think that follows the general pattern of Raw this week. I'm going to give it overall a B- as well. It was just a bit less of an explosive show than we've seen recently. There wasn't anything as good as we've seen on recent episodes of Raw, but at the same time, there wasn't anything quite as bad as some of the segments we've seen on recent Raws too. So I guess it was a consistent show, but a slightly underwhelming one as well. A slightly flat one, but one with no major flaws. The positive thing here is that I guess it does seem to be the exception that proves the rule. It's quite unusual now that we've got a Raw with relatively few talking points this week, which does seem to imply that Raw is getting more exciting as time goes on. And that's really exciting, especially with the whole Wednesday Night Wars coming up and AEW and NXT both getting TV shows. And it looks like basically wrestling television should hopefully pick up generally moving forward. So that was Raw Graded. Thank you very much for watching, and let me know what you thought of the show in those cheeky comments down below. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.